This is Stormwatch 2025, sponsored by Sunrise Irrigation, Generators Supercenter, and Universal Roof and Contracting.
The winds have really picked up.
We've had a few transformers blow.
Then you come across scenes like this.
A historic 2024 hurricane season.
Something unbelievable to show you. This is Tropicana Field. The roof has ripped off.
3 major storms hitting our coast. First, Debbie.
Over the next 4 hours, this will be the worst of it.
The winds changed directions.
Oh, they've gotten so much worse.
Then Helene.
Things are really getting rough out there.
Yeah, we've had a couple of crews that we've had to move from Pinellas to safety because the winds and the water are really coming up.
Just 2 weeks later, Hurricane Milton.
We just lost power.
It's a long night, the wind is howling, and with heavy rain.
Homes lost.
It was the worst thing I've ever seen in over 30 years that I've lived here.
People stuck waiting months to get back on their feet.
Through it all, Florida's most accurate weather team was by your side. Tracking.
The track has not changed.
Forecasting.
At this point in time, for the next 4 hours, do everything humanly possible to not go anywhere.
Everywhere you need us, on air or online, to keep your loved ones safe.
And we're ready to do it again as we help you prepare for another hurricane season. This is Stormwatch 2025. Hi, I'm ABC Action News Chief Meteorologist Denis Phillips, and this is Stormwatch 2025. We're at Treasure Island, where we all know 8 months ago this area was devastated by the surge from Hurricane Helene. Slowly but surely, things are getting back to normal. Yes, there are some spots, Krabby's in the past, that are still rebuilding, but a lot of spots across the water there are reopening. And our Casey Albrighton, she lives in Pinellas County and focuses on stories here in Pinellas. And she had a chance to talk to the folks at Treasure Island to see how they're preparing for this upcoming hurricane season.
The hurricanes last year. It's like a different world. I mean, when you think about what happened in October, total devastation, nothing was open, debris piles everywhere, everybody in total chaos. And now you look and it looks like almost a neighborhood.
Since last hurricane season, Treasure Island went from a devastated community to a city full of hope.
Differences like night and day between that and what has occurred right now in the past few weeks.
Treasure Island was flooded by Hurricane Helene last year.
I basically lost everything from the waist down. Clothes, cabinetry, furniture, all your paperwork.
It was the worst thing I've ever seen in over 30 years that I've lived here.
At first, the priority was cleanup.
There were more than 600 dump trucks from around the state that got over here and cleaned everything up.
But then it became issuing permits for repairs.
The permitting was an exhausting, overwhelming, totally frustrating. And that's partly because of our knowledge. We've never spoken this language before.
It took a while for permits to be issued following the storms because of staffing issues and FEMA requirements. But going into next hurricane season, Treasure Island Mayor John Doctor says they are more prepared.
We'll be much better prepared. And I think the thing that we learned is that, yes, we do have some resources. We can go to the county and to the state, but going out to some of the private entities as well that have trained folks.
Now the island is back open, hosting festivals and welcoming visitors to local restaurants, like VIP Mexican-American cuisine, which reopened in March.
Busier than normal, for sure, but definitely not the numbers we've seen in the past, but I would say since we've opened back up, it's been an amazing time.
And while this hurricane season holds a lot of unknowns, Treasure Island residents are resilient.
They have a real grounding here, and they don't want to give up. So yeah, the support here and the feeling is we will survive, we will overcome, and we will rebuild.
I'm Pinellas County reporter Casey Albrighton, ABC Action News.
That time of year again, we're making our list and checking it twice. We're going shopping, counting the days, but not until we open the gifts, until the season is over. Yeah, I'm talking about shopping for things like bottled water. You need 1 gallon per person per day. Things like flashlights, batteries, cell phone chargers. And then we've got some board games, maybe a deck of cards, a regular first aid kit, nothing too fancy, but just a basic kit. And then of course your medicines. What we need is everything to keep you sane and safe for up to a week without power. And of course, don't forget to shop for the really fun stuff like toilet paper and paper towels, disposable plates and spoons. And then we've got your propane and of course some charcoal for your grill, because you're going to want to cook all the stuff that's in your fridge and freezer that's threatening to spoil. And if we're without power for a week, you want to make sure that you've got plenty of shelf-stable, non-perishable foods that you're going to enjoy eating. So make sure you've got some of your favorite snacks. Some, healthy, maybe some not so much, but peanut butter is a good one. You want to have some nuts on hand. And of course, when it comes to canned goods, make sure you've got that manual can opener. If you or anyone else happen to get really grouchy without coffee in the morning and your coffee maker like mine requires power, I've got a suggestion. Get an inexpensive French press. All you have to do is boil the water on your grill, add the coffee grounds, and let it sit for about 3 to 4 minutes, and then you plunge and pour. Of course, you can mix in any of your non-perishable flavorings, and you've basically got your coffee shop coffee without having to go anywhere. So this is my all-time favorite pantry staple. I think it's an unsung hero. It's powdered milk. So simple. And it's not just great for coffee, but also for cereal, and it's a game changer when it comes to instant oatmeal. Add in things like dried fruit, maybe some chopped nuts or chocolate chips, and then your favorite spices. And it is actually going to be a breakfast that you'll enjoy when the options are limited. So once we're all stocked up and prepared for hurricane season, we can hope that this year our gift is a quiet season. And then on December 1st, yeah, that's the official end of the season. December 1st, we can break out that extra can of propane and our extra supplies and maybe make a tasty treat like some Monster Trail Mix. You can find a full list of helpful supplies and tips at abcactionnews.com. Shay Ryan, ABC Action News.
As we approach the 2025 hurricane season, there have been some changes by the National Hurricane Center, specifically on differences in watches and warnings. Our meteorologist Jason Adams has the latest on that coming up as Stormwatch 2025 continues. Welcome back to Stormwatch 2025. Every year, the National Hurricane Center makes little adjustments to their forecast and how they present it to us. This year, there are changes in watches and warnings. And our meteorologist Jason Adams has the latest on that.
As we prepare for the 2025 Atlantic hurricane season, I want to let you know about a change coming from the National Hurricane Center this year.
The surge is going to be pushed into the coast.
Back in 2017, the National Hurricane Center began issuing this thing called a potential tropical cyclone, or PTC. It brought some confusion with it, but was actually extremely beneficial to the public. Let's review what a PTC is and clear up any of that lingering confusion. Meet Christiane Pierce, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, Tampa Bay.
A potential tropical cyclone advisory is what the National Hurricane Center issues for systems that aren't yet tropical cyclones, but have a high potential of becoming a tropical cyclone, usually within 48 hours or up to 72 hours.
So while not yet classified as a tropical depression or storm, the PTC classification allows the NHC to issue advisories or warnings of the system's hazards it may bring to the coast before it becomes a name or numbered storm. A forecast track is also issued with a PTC, giving advance notice to communities that may be impacted. This year, the National Hurricane Center announced it would be issuing PTC designations 72 hours out instead of just 48 hours. This will give even more prep time for systems that develop close to the coast.
After hurricanes like Helene and Florence, the Hurricane Center decided to go with the potential tropical cyclone advisory 72 hours out. And really, it has to do with rapid intensification. Unfortunately, that is happening more often and will probably continue to happen with these storms, meaning, with a lot of our strongest storms in history, 3 days before they made landfall as major hurricanes, they were tropical storms. So we're trying to give people more time to prepare.
One of the best examples of why this is so important and so needed is Hurricane Helene. Helene's forecast was clear. This storm was going to be a massive system and likely a major landfalling hurricane along the Florida coast. This was evident days before the storm was even classified. The PTC designation worked well to get the Gulf Coast prepared, but the NHC feels that they could do even better with 3 days' notice instead of 2. I couldn't agree more. The potential tropical cyclone designation also works extremely well when the National Hurricane Center feels the system will likely undergo rapid intensification. Helene did just that, going from a Category 2 hurricane to a Category 4 hurricane as it passed to our west the night of September 26th.
Rapid intensification means that a storm increases by 35 miles per hour in a 24-hour period. So that means that the wind speeds are increasing rapidly. So you can have a tropical storm and then just a day later, a hurricane, or even a major hurricane. Like we saw with the case of Milton, it jumped really quickly. Yeah, we were tracking it a little bit longer than, like, let's say Helene, but the rapid intensification really amped up with those storms, and we see that often.
With the real possibility of a system not being classified as a depression yet, to becoming a major hurricane just 2 or 3 days later, potentially even making landfall, there just isn't enough advanced warning or notice for coastal communities without the PTC classification.
It'll alert people, and people, their eyes get drawn to a cone and they think it's real, I think, when there's a cone. So with the potential tropical cyclone advisory and the cone, or the track being out 72 hours instead of the 48 hours, again, it just gives people more time to prepare. And we always like to say, don't focus on the cone, of course. Inside, outside, all around, the impacts will be felt far and wide, depending on the size of the system. So if you're anywhere even near this said cone, you need to be preparing.
Where we live, and as we've seen, tropical cyclone development in the Gulf is exactly the reason why this is warranted. For ABC Action News, I'm meteorologist Jason Adams.
The best things you can do here to protect yourself, your property, and your family is to know what kind of flood zone do you live in. All of us here in West Central Florida live in some sort of flood zone, and understanding the risks associated with it are really important. To find it, all you've got to do is put in your county or city name into Google and then the words flood zone. I put in Hillsborough County flood zone, took me right to this map. Hillsborough County has a nice viewer that you can access right there that will show you a map of where we are, and it'll allow you to zoom in right down to the street level. And when you get close enough, you will see it start to populate with flood zones in the blue and the orange. If you don't know where do you exactly live on a map and prefer to put in your address, you can just put it in right there in that box, hit search, and it'll take you down to your property. As you zoom in and explore, you will notice it's not just coastal areas like Davis Islands and downtown Tampa that are in flood zones, but places along the Hillsborough River and even interior bodies of water, such as this pond here in Tampa Heights by Interstate 275. You'll also notice that different flood zones have different code names. Some start with an A, some start with a V, others may have an X when you actually access your property. What does all that mean? Well, there's a website for that will explain it to you. Now, folks at Climate Check have a really nice chart here that shows you increasing risk as you go through the flood zones. Most of us here in West Central Florida will live in some version of Zone X. That is not a flood-free zone. That is a low-risk zone. You still can see flooding if you live in Zone X. That is really important. Zone X folks usually live in places that are not near a body of water or the coast. So you would flood more often in a heavy rain event, and that's something that's much more difficult to predict. For those of you that live near a body of water, such as a river or lake or a pond, you may be in a high-risk A zone, AE, AH, AO, whatever that area is. If it starts with A, you're in a high-risk zone because of a body of water nearby. And then those that live right at the coast, you're in some version of zones V, VE, maybe V with a number. That basically means you're at the coast and the surge is coming into your area during a storm. These areas, zones A and zones V, you are in a very special place. In fact, places that are in high-risk zones, such as Zone A or Zone V, have a 1 in 100 chance of flooding any one year. Now, at first, that seems rather low, but here's another way to look at it. This is a great stat from floodsmart.gov. Over a 30-year mortgage, so the time you plan to own your home, if you live in Zone A or V, there's a 25% chance that you will flood at least once during that 30-year mortgage, with some places flooding more than that. In fact, folks even outside of Zone A could still see flooding. In fact, the National Flood Insurance Program shows that 40% of claims to that program are outside of high-risk zones, A and V. Many times, those claims come from Zone X, and that is why even if you're in Zone X, you still need to be cautious about flooding during tropical storms and heavy rain events.
Up next, areas along the coast obviously had devastating floods from Helene, but there were other areas even farther away from the beach that had massive flooding.
It was a sad day. It really was a sad day for all of us.
We'll be back with more on Stormwatch 2025. Anytime a storm threatens our area, it's important to know what evacuation zone you live in. This is a map showing all of the counties surrounding Tampa Bay. In most, red is zone A, then B in orange, C in yellow, D in green, and E in purple. If an evacuation is called for in your area, you must be ready to act. Hurricane Milton may have made landfall in Siesta Key, but its effects were felt all the way up and down the Bay Area, especially along the coast. But even in Clearwater, several miles from the beach, the Standard apartment complex was devastated and over 500 people were forced to evacuate. Our Larissa Scott has the latest as she's gone back to see how those folks are doing.
Last October, many of the buildings here at the Standard Apartments were flooded after Hurricane Milton, and I'm back now trying to figure out what went wrong.
In the early morning hours after Hurricane Milton, I was there as water was rapidly rising.
We're actually in the Clearwater area just off of Drew Street. I want to get out of the way to show you we have a water rescue happening right now as we speak.
We arrived the same time as the first responders did. They immediately deployed boats to rescue people who were trapped.
You know, our crews are using inflatable boats and high water vehicles to try to go door to door to check on people.
People like a tenant named Kevin, who I interviewed live over FaceTime. He was stuck on the second floor, fearing the water would keep rising.
Kevin, stay safe. There are crews out to rescue you.
With water chest deep in some places throughout the complex, those crews worked for hours that day, helping hundreds of people get out.
565 people were removed and rescued from this property.
Ricardo Scott was one of those people.
Swimming up to our necks just to get down to the stairs from the second floor is not good.
As we head into a new hurricane season, we went back to see what things look like now at the Standard apartment complex. That's when I met Jessica Paris Adorno. She'll never forget that day it flooded.
It was a sad day. It really was a sad day for all of us, being displaced and didn't know where we would go. Not many of us have anywhere to go.
She's lived there for 5 years and tells me it's been a struggle in the months following Hurricane Milton, especially in the weeks immediately after.
Just the smell and the gnats and the garbage, it left so much debris that I felt defeated. I cried every day.
When you look around, you can see buildings still boarded up, many downstairs apartments gutted, serving as reminders of what happened. People here nervous for this hurricane season. So I started asking questions. How did this happen, and why did this complex flood when surrounding neighborhoods didn't have it nearly as bad?
The city tells me part of the problem is that the majority of this complex sits in a bowl. And you can see that here where the adjacent street and surrounding neighborhood sits much higher.
Another issue was the ground was already saturated from Hurricane Helene, and with the significant rainfall from Hurricane Milton, most ditches, creeks, and streams in the area were overflowing. The city also tells me the complex, including nearby Alligator Creek, is a FEMA floodplain. The city says the complex's stormwater system is privately owned by the apartment and that the pumps were not running when the city responded to the property. I reached out to the apartment complex, and they tell me the pumps were working properly during the storm, but that after the storm had passed, 2 retaining walls busted underneath the ground level and let all the water back into the canal. They also shared in part that this was, quote, an unfortunate event. Both retaining walls are being repaired at this moment, and the whole wall is being inspected to make sure this kind of issue doesn't happen again. Jessica and other neighbors we talked to who did not want to go on camera tell us they have seen improvements in the complex and really feel like things are getting better.
They care, and anything that they can do, they help.
They're hopeful things will get back to normal soon.
I'm very hopeful.
And praying this hurricane season will be much kinder. Reporting in Clearwater, Larissa Scott, ABC Action News.
After last year's hurricanes, one of the biggest issues was insurance. So many folks were left high and dry thinking they were covered, and in reality, they weren't. Our anchor Nadine Yanis has the latest on how you can be prepared for the upcoming season.
It got scary, I'll be honest with you. It did get scary.
But first, we're on the ground in Manatee County, listening to people in some of the hardest hit communities about their rebuilding while preparing for this season.
As our neighbors continue to rebuild after an historic season,
I can't believe this hurricane season's already here.
We all prepare for another year.
If it's exposed, especially to salt water, it definitely needs to be pulled out of your garage.
The things we often forget during the stress of a storm that could cost you everything.
And as soon as our water moves from that particular spot on the car over to the right, the fire comes right back.
And the new solution to protect our shores.
It acts just like mangrove roots.
The creative solution found right here in Florida.
I look at that seawall and I don't just see a concrete wall, I see a whole marine ecosystem.
Fighting nature with nature.
I'm ABC Action News Chief Meteorologist Denis Phillips. Welcome back to Stormwatch 2025. We're here in Treasure Island, one of the hardest hit areas from Hurricanes Helene and Milton. Another area devastated by floodwaters is Manatee County. And our anchor Paula Groen has been talking to folks there as they rebuild and look ahead to the future.
Paul, I know the weather conditions are starting to deteriorate quickly.
6 months ago, Hurricane Milton roared into Manatee County as a Category 3 storm. Me really starting to sing with the wind coming through. We were live on the ground, capturing Milton's fury in real time and speaking with neighbors as the winds howled and the rain poured. All right, Gigi, Carl, how are you?
Worried about the door blowing.
That's all right. How you guys doing? How you holding up?
Holding up. Actually, the power's been off and on, so we've been lucky to keep it on. How about you over there?
We're doing good. You can tell the wind's starting to pick up.
All right.
Blue tarps. You see the blue tarp still 6 months later over that mobile home.
Now, 6 months later, we're back in Manatee County checking in on those same neighbors as they rebuild their lives with another hurricane season now just weeks away.
It got scary, I'll be honest with you. It did get scary.
We met Carl at home again on a perfect Florida day.
What was that like, riding this thing out here?
Well, like I said, we had some wine, so that helped us out. But no, it was, it just got stronger and stronger. Couldn't believe it.
And what did Gigi think, your better half, about this whole experience?
Gigi would have been better for this interview, but she's already been talking about this. I can't believe this hurricane season's already here. So thankfully Gigi was sleeping, but I was pacing the house. Yeah, I think it was the wine.
So you were babysitting the storm and she was out?
Yeah, that's right. That's
Nice.
right. We were out of power here for about 11 days.
Oh,
or
wow.
12, I think, yeah.
So that was not comfortable.
No, that was not.
Each storm teaches you something different. I always say in covering the storm is actually the easy part. It's the day after and the day after that and the day after that that I think are the kind of the grind of it.
Just up the road from Carl and Gigi's Royal Garden Estates. The morning after Milton, we were live on the air as residents came home to find this.
And look at this, and the story of this situation here is you see the insulation of a roof, the tree there completely ripped the roof off of this manufactured home. The folks here haven't even moved in yet.
Destruction in every direction after the hurricane. Homes leveled, lives upended.
Holly, hey dear, we're on the air here on ABC Action News.
We met Holly live on the air as she hit the ground, helping her neighbors.
Our goal was to get our stuff unpacked from the hotel and then just start reaching out to people to see what we could do to help them in the littlest way.
6 months later, we checked in with Chuck, one of Holly's neighbors.
6 months later, what is your sense of how things are here?
Well, it's come back together a long ways. At that point you're talking, there was no electricity, no water, no sewer, nothing for, 2 weeks or better. And each thing come back on its own, and everybody was there to help everybody else out.
Chuck's home did okay. His carport took a beating. And today, he's optimistic, but cautious.
No one wants to acknowledge that we're about to enter another hurricane season, but we're less than 2 months out. What are your thoughts leading up to June 1st and the 6 months after?
Well, I'm not no weather reporter, but this hadn't happened since 1921. It was that many years between them, so our law averages should be better.
While some scars still remain, hope is shared by many here as the county works to rebuild and fully recover. Looking ahead to another hurricane season, Carl tells me he's more prepared this time and ready for whatever comes to his piece of paradise.
Do you think about it? Do you dread it? Or do you just say, you know what, I'll deal with it when it happens?
I'm more the deal with it when it happens and be prepared type of guy.
Yeah.
I think my Army background helps me. I try to be ready for any situation. So more prepared. I'm actually looking at a different generator that's battery run. Praying for a good season. You know, we've been here 8 years and there's 4 or 5 between Ian and Dorian a couple others, but yeah, last year was definitely challenging because they hit on our coast here, you know, so better prepared.
Yeah,
that's all you can
absolutely.
say.
Carl, thank you for taking the time.
No worries,
GG I
Paul.
said hello.
Yeah, it's great to see you again.
Appreciate it.
If it's a vacation or flood insurance, pay the flood insurance.
From learning the tough lesson of not having flood insurance, to not knowing your policy.
I would say read every word in the policy. Definitely flood insurance.
Or having a hurricane deductible that was simply too high.
Hope and pray that I can get some help from the insurance, but unfortunately my deductible's like outrageous.
So many of you have told me you were left with nothing from your insurance company after last hurricane season. But this hurricane season, we're taking action to make sure you are protected.
So here is just all of part of his baseball card collection.
And it starts with knowing your policy and documenting the valuables inside your home.
And then this one, I've just walked around the house to see make sure everything was secure.
It's something Diane Jackson did.
We just made sure all the policies were up to date. We just didn't know. We really just didn't know.
What didn't you know?
Well, we didn't know what could happen.
And after surviving last hurricane season, this year she is preparing even more.
So you have probably heard about taking video evidence of everything inside of your house ahead of hurricane season, but what about protecting the outside of your home? Well, one Lutz man is now taking insurance preparation to new heights by using drones for insurance reasons.
I'm at 71 feet up. I'm getting a bird's eye view of literally the entire roof.
Diane is using the services of Matt Bruger, a local law enforcement officer taking up this side hustle after being deployed to help tarp roofs after Hurricane Ian.
Now, that's the big thing from what I saw over there is a lot of roof damage and people saying, oh no, that's pre-existing damage. The insurance company saying, hey, this is pre-existing damage, when it really wasn't.
You saw that firsthand?
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. You always want to get that type of stuff documented. You know, natural wear and tear on a roof is going to happen. That doesn't give the right for insurance companies to deny you the right, though.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Insurance agent Jake Holhouse.
The more documentation you have, the better your claims experience is going to be.
Breaking down what else you should be doing to get your insurance documents ready and in place now.
You know, one is looking at your hurricane deductible, right? You can look at that now before the hurricane is coming. Another is look at your flood zone and look at your evacuation zone. If you're, in a flood zone, making sure that you have flood coverage, and if you're in a non-required flood zone, now is a great time to get flood coverage in place.
Because there are waiting periods you need to be aware of.
If the storm is on the way, basically carriers restrict coverage changes, so you can't make any changes on there. And on the flood insurance side, it's a 15 to 30 day wait for that to take effect.
I'm telling you, when I lived through the hurricane, I sat in our room and I felt the window shake and I heard the trees. It is scary. So I will definitely be prepared this year, ready to go.
For a full breakdown insurance-wise of everything you need to prepare this storm season, head over to abcactionnews.com/insurance. Covering insurance for you, I'm ABC Action News anchor Nadine Yanis.
Still to come, floods and fires, the dangers after the storm, what you need to do before and after to keep home safe. There were many lessons learned after our hurricane season. And one of the ones I think a lot of folks didn't realize is the fire dangers that occur after the power comes back on. Our consumer investigator, Susan Alcori, has the latest on how you can stay safe and protect your home as we enter this upcoming hurricane season.
Once you see it, it's hard to forget. A Tesla igniting in seconds while Hurricane Helene surged through a Pinellas County home.
Anybody in your house? Fire department!
On another street, firefighters floated by a house they couldn't save as lithium-ion batteries hit by floodwater caused another kind of devastation.
How are we going to fight that fire?
The threat isn't only during the storm, but in the days, weeks, even a month later.
Knowing if it's exposed, especially to salt water, it definitely needs to be pulled out of your garage.
Casey Raz knows a thing about that.
My engine was first on scene.
An electric car submerged in the storm started burning while being towed.
You can see us putting water on the fire.
Raz took cell phone video to show what her team faced.
And as soon as our water moves from that particular spot on the car over to the right, the fire comes right back.
Salt water conducts electricity and is highly corrosive. a combination you don't want to mix with an EV's lithium-ion battery. Once it sparks, the fire burns hotter and faster.
Eventually, it burned itself out.
After that experience, you were thinking,
We need a different plan.
that plan is now EV blankets, like this one the Hillsborough County Fire Department bought. It covers the flames but won't stop the fire. It's meant to keep it from spreading.
There's no telltale sign of when one is going to let loose and actually become a fire.
The risk isn't confined to cars. It extends to anything with a lithium-ion battery. Golf carts, electric scooters and bikes, kids' toys, even power tools.
The corrosion will be a much slower, gradual process that you won't be able to see, but the actual ignition of the battery will be instantaneous.
That's why prevention is key. When a hurricane's coming, those batteries shouldn't be anywhere near water.
It's usually so intense that there is a lack of warning and there's a lack of ability for people to escape.
This is what can happen. An EV fire burned down a 2-story home on Davis Island during Hurricane Helene. So if you do have something with a lithium-ion battery that gets wet, pull it out into an open area. Don't turn it on and contact a service to safely dispose of it. I'm consumer investigator Susan L. Corey, ABC Action News.
I'm Rebecca Petite in Lakeland. As we head into another hurricane season, NOAA hurricane hunters are preparing their fleet and testing out new technologies.
Our job is really to help the pilots figure out where to go.
As a flight director and meteorologist for NOAA, Jonathan Zawislock helps guide pilots during hurricane hunter missions.
It's all pretty bad weather up in a hurricane, right? But we want to find the best route. So we want to find the best route through the eye wall, find the center, maneuver around those really intense outer ram bands. If we don't have to put the airplane through severe turbulence, we're not going to do it.
As hurricane season approaches, lots of preparation is going on to make sure the hurricane hunter fleet at NOAA's Aircraft Operations Center is ready to go. The aircraft is currently being equipped with operational instruments that collect data needed to understand the storm.
And then there's going to be research instruments as well. Those research instruments are the new technology, the future, that we want to sample and experiment with to see how is it going to help us understand the storm in the future and forecast better in the future.
NOAA recently began deploying drones inside the storm where conditions are the most chaotic and too dangerous for pilots.
Our most deployed instrumentation. So these drop wind sondes, they capture things like GPS data with regards to temperature, wind speed, humidity, pressure, any type of meteorological parameter that you might want to get and record inside of the hurricane environment. And so we'll pepper the storm with these.
While hurricane hunters are in the air, data is transmitted in real time to the National Hurricane Center for forecasting and models.
The entire purpose of the mission and the reason why our crews are deploying into these storm systems is to be sure that the people that are in harm's way are listening to the warnings, listening to their local emergency officials, and heeding what they're saying.
I'm Polk County reporter Rebecca Petite, ABC Action News.
Still to come, fighting nature with nature. The unique solution one Florida company has to protect our coast from storm surge.
Storm surge is the rise of water higher than tides usually increased by a hurricane and can cause catastrophic flooding. In 2024, all storm surge fatalities from Hurricane Helene were in the Tampa Bay area. That's why it's important to learn from the past and prepare for the future. Hey guys, it's ABC Action News meteorologist Allie Blake, and I sat down with the director of the National Hurricane Center, Michael Brennan, about storm surge and what we learned from last year's storms.
It's a really important reminder for the Gulf Coast of Florida in general that storm surge risk can extend far, far away from the path of the center of the storm, and why it's so important that you pay attention and be ready for the issuance of those storm surge watches and warnings.
What are some things that we've kind of learned from last year as a community and even as a weather community?
Yeah, you're right. 2024 was extremely impactful along the Gulf Coast. 5 U.S. hurricane landfalls. Tampa Bay got significant impacts from both Helene and Milton. I think one of the things I wanted to touch on was just, if you think about Helene, it made landfall all the way up here north of Keaton Beach, up in the Big Bend region. But we had, 5 to 7 feet of inundation above ground level along Pinellas County, Clearwater, up into the Tampa Bay region.
Why exactly is Tampa Bay just so susceptible to storm surge?
Well, in general, the Gulf Coast of Florida is susceptible quite quite dramatically to storm surge because of the gradual slope of the continental shelf along the Gulf Coast allows the water to be piled up out ahead of the storm. But obviously, the Tampa Bay region in particular allows that water to be funneled up inside the bay. And if the wind direction is just right, say the storm makes landfall just north of the mouth of the bay, you can funnel all of that water very quickly into the bay itself and result in a very significant storm surge.
As sea levels continue to warm and rise, higher storm surge could be the new norm if impacted by a rapidly intensifying storm. Additionally, as we continue to recover and rebuild from last year's hurricanes, it's important to understand and respect the power of water.
I think most folks who live along the water know seawalls absolutely took a major hit during our hurricane season last year. But what if there was a better way to build them? Our Michael Paluska decided to go to Miami to talk to a new company who could very well be reinventing the way we protect our coastal areas.
We're here in Miami at Kind Designs, where this robot is building basically a 3D print of a living seawall. This is going to be 10 feet in height when it's done. It takes about an hour to complete, and this is going to make our coast more resilient to hurricanes. The time lapses of these living seawalls are both mesmerizing and fascinating because what started as a thin bead of concrete grew into this. You'll notice we blurred some sections so competitors can't copy their design.
We are the first and only company in the world to 3D print seawalls.
They are the brainchild of Anya Freeman, founder and CEO of Kind Designs. Originally from Ukraine, Freeman tells me climate change and yearly devastation from hurricanes inspired her to build a better wall.
So, what is the problem with traditional seawalls? So number one is obviously the cost. The second problem with traditional seawalls is that they destroy marine habitats.
The key to these living seawalls is really in the design and how that 3D printer stacks. There's little nooks and crannies for animals to cling onto, and there's also little areas for them to go up into and hide from potential predators.
It acts just like mangrove roots.
Maddie Rieger is the project lead at Kind Designs. When you see that seawall over there and you know what it's going to turn into in 5-10 years, how does that make you feel?
It makes me feel really, really happy and like we're really doing something to give back to the environment around us. So I'm super excited about what we're doing because I look at that seawall and I don't just see a concrete wall, I see a whole marine ecosystem that will be there in a few years.
On Longboat Key along Sarasota Bay, we met with Ryan Gandy, the Science and Restoration Manager for the Sarasota Bay Estuary Program.
These are vinyl or fiberglass reinforced seawalls.
He's helped spearhead the effort for Kind Designs to build their very first project here on Florida's west coast. The goal, bring back the oysters and marine life.
They're going to do almost 300 feet of the seawall behind me.
What could the benefits be, say, over a year or two?
They do what we call ecosystem services. So it adds to the populations of fish and shrimp and crabs that are around here by having them. When storms come through, if you have a mature oyster bar or even mature mangroves with oysters growing on the roots of those, it attenuates the wave energy coming into that property. So you can actually protect a lot of infrastructure by having that natural shoreline and a combination of oysters and mangroves.
And can you retrofit this on top of an existing seawall?
So whether you're putting in a new seawall or putting one in front of an old seawall, you can use our panels. Our panels don't change the installation method. They're installed exactly like a traditional seawall, and any local marine contractor can do the installation themselves.
Last year, we witnessed the sheer power of Hurricanes Debbie, Helene, and Milton, destroying seawalls, knocking homes made of concrete and steel off their foundations. In 2022, we were there as the surge from Hurricane Nicole, just a Category 1 storm, washed homes into the Atlantic Ocean at Wilbur by the Sea. Freeman says using nature to fight nature will make our coast stronger. Will the marine life that attaches to it harden the seawall even more to protect it from storm surge?
It actually, they call it bioconcrete. As sea life attaches, they're depositing their shells or their skeletons into the wall. They're repairing cracks, improving the strength of the wall, and it also attracts more and more sea life.
You launched an entire company based upon trying to make Florida stronger and more resilient. Do you feel as though if we put these all over the place or if we just built smarter that we can remain in Florida as we deal with all the climate changes?
Gosh, absolutely. So the idea is to mass produce these seawalls in Florida, replace every toxic linear foot of seawalls with essentially an artificial reef, which is also dissipating waves, and then set an example to the rest of the world of what's possible and really be able to bring that message of hope and excitement about innovation and the possibilities to keep their coastal cities safe forever.
In Miami with photojournalist Reed Moeller, Michael Paluska, ABC Action News.
Thanks for watching Stormwatch 2025. As we go into hurricane season, we have you covered 24/7. You can always tune into our streaming app, check out ABC Action News Plus, as well as Denis Phillips Live. I'll be on every Tuesday and Thursday, and starting in July, nightly from 7:30 to 8. We've got a long hurricane season in front of us. Trust me, our weather team will be there with you 24/7 to help keep your family safe during this upcoming season. Have a great night.